In this lesson on deviance, I want to highlight another, and I think quite interesting model of deviance, one developed by Katz, the foreground of deviance. In this particular model, his argument is that some people may very well engage in deviant acts because they get off on the thrill. So the deviance kind of in the moment experience of committing the deviant act comes into play, because certain deviant acts may be quite appealing, quite interesting, emotionally, as you can note here, seductive. So there's a kind of rush, a kind of high that people get for committing the act itself. An example of this that he highlights is shoplifting. And although this information is not included in your study guide, you can take a moment to read over the points that he argues. And it is interesting that he notes that maybe this does help to explain why the vast majority of shoplifters are, again, folks who are not from lower socioeconomic class backgrounds or underprivileged positions in society, but are often quite well-to-do, including celebrities, such as this woman, Naomi Whiter, who was caught red-handed making off with several $1,000s of goods in the form of clothing and other items from Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills. She had tons of money. Why would she do it? Well, additional research based upon, again, Katz's approach highlights the fact that the same kind of thing may very well apply to the actions of some muggers and robbers. They kind of, if you will, get off on setting up and then taking advantage of their victims. They may even come to feel morally superior and rationalize that their victims actually deserved what they got because they just weren't observant, they just weren't savvy enough. What's very interesting about this model, it highlights the fact that we people are not merely products of our environment, but we're actively involved in creating meaningful experiences for ourselves, even if they happen to be harmful to others. To a degree, this relates back to those techniques of neutralization that we analyzed in the last lesson. Don't lose sight of the fact that reality is socially constructed. Now, I also want to highlight white-collar crime or elite deviance. Bear in mind again that there's some information on the 21st page of your study guide, your third study guide, that will reinforce, again, the significance and the importance of this particular type of crime. This is a bit more elaborate detail of what I have in the study guide. I want you to take a moment again to look at these various forms of what are referred to as white-collar crime. As a matter of fact, perhaps it might be useful for you to take a moment and look over the information noted here. Remember again, these are crimes that are committed by people of prestigious positions in society. Like Henson points out, criminals in suits, if you wish. And this is a definition from the Department of Justice of white-collar crimes or elite crimes. Take a moment to look over this. Now, that can become kind of gobbledygook, okay? So, what exactly is white-collar crime? What forms does it take? Well, here are just a few. Now, some of these, like employee theft, are crimes against companies. This is sometimes called pilfering. Okay. On the other hand, when you look at healthcare fraud, tax evasion, ID theft, embezzlement, legal stock exchanges, as well as dangers to the environment. Okay? These are crimes against the public. Now, on the other hand, there are crimes against employees. These are work-related illnesses and injuries. Okay? Also, if you look at price fixing, as well as consumer deaths, these are crimes against customers. And the thing I really want to drive home is the seriousness of this process. Maybe you can think of white-collar crime in this way. Although, notice that official definition, it doesn't have elements of violence associated with it. It is a very serious set of offenses. Or maybe this cartoon illustrates it in part as well. Or this one. And some sociologists would argue that there is a direct link to social class as well as power when it comes to elite or white-collar offenses. Interesting political cartoon. Now, coming back, you want to highlight the fact that we're talking about something that is quite expensive. Most authorities argue that, at least conservatively, we're talking about $500 billion. Although I've seen figures as high as $1.7 trillion. Okay? Cyber crimes alone can be terribly expensive. Some suggest that they may outstrip, literally again, other forms of white-collar offenses. And putting them, I've seen figures as high as $400 billion just in cyber crimes alone. Well, that puts them up there in the ranks of drug trafficking as such. So you want to bear in mind again that when you compare this kind of financial expense in excess of $500 billion, well, what about conventional crime? Okay. Well, notice again, it's going to vary from anywhere from 14 to 18 billion. So we're talking about something that is much, much more expensive. And a particular infamous example comes from this automobile, the Ford Pinto. Now, Ford knew, literally almost from the beginning, that they had a problem here, as is highlighted here. The concern was the location of the gas tank. It was too close to the rear bumper. The rear bumper was simply not protective enough. So when some Pintos were struck from behind, the gas tank ruptured. If there were any sparks, there were fires. And there were people who, again, were horribly burned. And some lost their lives because of this particular problem. Now, what's quite interesting is that Ford made an unethical, or at least ethically questionable, decision. This is from an internal memo. Focus on the top category, benefits. What Ford Motor Company apparently did is, okay, what if we, again, make these automobiles, and also, I might add, trucks. There were a total of 11 million cars and 1.5 million light trucks who had this gas tank problem. Well, the company ascertained that to make these automobiles or vehicles safe, it was going to cost $11 per unit. So if they recall, again, the cars and the light trucks, the total cost of the company was going to be somewhere in this area, $137 million. Okay? Then they thought, well, what if we don't do anything? We just take our chances in court. Worst case scenario, this is what they came up with. Okay? And again, they considered this first right up here as savings. This would be the unit cost, and then finally the total benefit. So once the executives at Ford Motor Company again saw this, they made the decision of, well, are we going to change the automobile, make it safer, or are we going to take our chances in court? What do you think they did? Well, they decided to opt here. We'll take our chances in court. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this is me speaking as your instructor, it's a criminal offense. Ford made a decision not to make improvements to the gas tank after they completed this risk-benefit analysis. All it was going to cost, again, was $11. So, in essence, Ford did not consider the lives that would be saved as perhaps that significant. So, white-collar offenses. Why don't they attract the same attention as conventional crime? Well, at the bottom of page 21, there are some factors that might explain for that to you. But this cartoon kind of fits it. And do you ever see this at a white-collar crime scene? Well, probably not. So a lot of authorities highlight the fact that one of the reasons that white-collar crime hasn't really attracted the attention that other forms of crime. By the way, I might add one point that's rather interesting. Studies have highlighted the fact that local news gives far more attention to, again, conventional crime, especially murder and homicide, than they do for white-collar crime. So we're talking about a particular form of criminal offense, deviance, that's kind of hard to see. It's often very hidden. Victims are not always obvious. It may take a long period of time before the victims are literally presented to the public. Furthermore, as we just pointed out, this is not only less publicized, but it doesn't, again, have a threatening element to it, in part because there's usually little, if any, violent potential. And this may be one of the more significant elements. Remember the interplay, we've focused on this before. Power, class. Okay, well, the violations are often handled privately, usually in civil courts, not criminal courts. And if someone is found guilty, more often than not, they pay a fine. They don't go to jail as such. But one particular form of white-collar crime that is becoming more and more common is identification theft. Okay? Interestingly enough, 43% of all identity theft is a result of someone having their wallet or some paperwork stolen. 11% of all identity theft occurs through the internet. And account fraud as a result of identity theft can be as high as $31 billion. And how long does it take, on average, to repair the damage? 330 hours. So consider, if you will, the significance and the implications of white-collar crime.